I can't believe Wick. Gosh, Wick looks. Sorry, this is just me being mean. Okay, I'll admit this is mean. Wick gets one free pass at me. Okay, but like Wick just looks so much like a fucking wretch. He just looks like such a fucking buck-toothed wretch in real life. Like, look at him slumped over like that with a fucking loose ass collar that's just been pulled out the fucking box. This balding wretch. Okay, go scam some more of your fans, you fucking wretch. Okay, that's it. That's the only personal attack I'm gonna give this entire stream. Okay.
And they're doing it again now. The idea that if we suddenly withdraw our funding, if we withdraw our forces, if we decide to just, let Putin have this little bite now, that he will somehow stop is ludicrous. It's naive.
With that being said, I'm going to be supporting WhickTV throughout the rest of the stream against the horrible conservative brigade of LactoidTV and Tim Pool. I hope Tim Pool and LactoidTV gets fucking demolished by WhickTV. Okay.
Putin will not stop. He must be stopped. We have a situation where we are and should be funding more money into Ukraine because that money doesn't just go to Ukraine. It goes to American jobs in American factories, building American weapons to fight America's enemies and support America's allies. We made in 2024.
It's always good to know that my jokes are funny, okay? So, feel free to tell me that you're laughing, all right? Gives me more encouragement.
$316 billion selling foreign weapons, selling our weapons to foreign countries. This dwarfs the numbers that we've given in aid to Ukraine. And this demand spiked in 2024 by 26%, in part because we have shown ourselves, at least to some degree, to be a reliable ally. And so Poland, the Netherlands, other countries want to take and
Dylan Burns is not a war tourist. What are you talking about? He's not. Okay.
Help rearm. They're up in their GDP, but there's more money out there than there is stuff. So we have an opportunity now to rebuild our industrial base and use Ukraine as a way to do that because there's other conflicts coming. We have a trade war with China coming up, right? Trade wars can often turn into something a little bit hotter, and it behooves us to be prepared for that. And I think Ukraine is a good reason to do so. That's my argument.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, my argument's pretty straightforward. I think we've been sold a lie when it comes to the war in Ukraine. We've been sold this tale of a David versus Goliath, this fledgling democracy that's being threatened by this massive authoritarian power, when the reality is the truth is much more complicated. I mean, here we are $200 billion later, and all we've managed to buy for ourselves is about 500,000 dead, probably more at this point, another 500,000 wounded, some critically, probably more at this point. And this was all done in service of a power structure in Ukraine that's becoming increasingly authoritarian, a power structure that was founded upon a illegal and unconstitutional coup that disenfranchised millions of people in the East that we just don't seem to care about. We didn't seem to care about it in 2014, but it's the direct cause of what's going on now.
Now, Lactoid is just completely being fucking dishonest here, okay? So what he's talking about is when there is a president that is a puppet of Putin who is in power of Ukraine, and essentially what happened is that he was trying to make new laws that suppressed protesting and suppressed free speech. Obviously, the Ukrainians weren't going to put up with it. And not only that, I'm pretty sure he also rigged the elections of the vote. So again, all right, the Ukrainians had every single right to throw out this guy because he was also ordering snipers to shoot at Ukrainian protesters. So yes, he was basically a fucking tyrant at that point. And yeah, he deserved to be fucking overthrown, okay?
On top of all of that, Ukraine is losing.
By the way, this is a Kremlin talking point, okay? The Kremlin talking point is, oh, this is the cause of the war. This is why. It's either, oh, Ukrainians are Nazis, or, oh, they did an unjustified coup, an illegal coup, all right? Again, if you coup a tyrant, it may be illegal, but it certainly is fucking justified. Yeah, absolutely.
And Ukraine continues to lose every single day, despite the fact that we're dumping money into it. And last time I brought this up, you and your comrades kept hammering, well, Kursk, they have Kursk.
Last time.
Kursk is gone, right?
No, it's not.
Ukrainians have lost Kursk.
They have not. They still have forces in Kursk today. Not as much, right? Not as much of Kursk, but today.
They have a single-digit percentage fraction of what they had, and the Russian forces are moving into Sumy. I'm following the war every single day. The Russians make gains every single day. The Ukrainians lose ground every single day, and we're dumping money into this dumpster fire.
Guys, remember, okay? Careful. If somebody appeals to legal arguments, you should keep them on that path. If people appeal to moral arguments, you should keep them on that path. One way that slimy motherfuckers will weave in and out of arguments is if they use legal arguments in the same argument sometimes, and for the other times they are using moral arguments. You have to catch them in that because it's a very, very devious way of doing argumentation. You got to keep it consistent. It's either moral arguments or it's fucking legal arguments, okay? Not both.
Let's start here. Why did Russia invade Ukraine?
Well, Russia has always wanted to be to regain Ukraine. So Putin has said many times in his interview with Tucker Carlson and in speeches and in other statements that he wants to regain the imperial power of Russia, to establish greater Russia. And Ukraine, in his mind, is part of that project. He believes that they are ethnically Russian, that Ukrainians don't exist in a real way, and he just wants to bring them into his fold, right? That's his belief structure, and that's why he's doing this. This nonsense that people will say about, like, oh, it's NATO expansion, oh, it's this, oh, it's that. It's not. Putin has been very clear. He's doing this because he believes that Ukraine doesn't exist, and Ukraine is part of greater Russia, and he'll have it back.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of American propaganda version of whenever the enemies are going to...
That's what Putin has
said. Well, no, it's more complicated than that. As I think we're going to visit a lot here, a lot of the claims here that are being made are more complicated. There's more gray area than I think you're giving credit for. The reasons for the war in Ukraine are complex, and there's many of them. But some of the main issues are the disenfranchisement of millions of people in Crimea and the Donbass, and really the east of Ukraine that happened in 2014 when there was a constitutional, unpopular coup that took place.
It's
not a distraction. That matters. If we care about constitutional order and we care about democracy, we can't just ignore it when it benefits our enemies.
Even if I grant you this.
One last thing. The NATO expansion is also, of course, going to be one of the major factors. A few days before the invasion, a demand was made, don't let Ukraine join NATO. That demand was ignored. It was up to them. And then a few days later, the 2022 invasion.
Wait, okay. Again, guys. So this is another Kremlin talking point, okay? It isn't that NATO keeps expanding. NATO is actually inherently, and I can't stress it enough, they are inherently a very, very reclusive organization, okay? Other Baltic states are begging for membership, okay? Don't let them twist, the narrative on this, okay? These Baltic states are begging to join NATO, okay? They desperately want to join NATO. Why? Because Russia is threatening to take them over. And Russia, so far, does not attack NATO countries, okay? So never, ever, 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 ever let them take this narrative, okay? Yeah. NATO isn't expanding. The Baltics chose to join them. They're not being misled. Yes, remember, in every single situation, it's the country themselves that are initiating, okay? You are not initiating conflict with Russia by joining a defensive alliance because you're afraid of Russia, right? That's like saying you're initiating abuse from your dad by running to CPS. That's what you're arguing for, okay? It's like if you run to CPS and your dad beats you up because you ran to CPS because you're afraid of your dad. It's almost as if you've been proven right.
Happened.
It is up to them. Why wouldn't it be up to them? If we're going to... let me ask you this. Do you think that a country's sovereignty matters?
I think that a country's sovereignty matters to an extent. To an extent. I think.
Let me ask you a question. If the Colombia protesters, right, the ones who supported Hamas and things, were like, you know what, and they're citizens. I'm not talking about the student visas and things like that. The citizens of Colombia were like, you know what, we hate America. We want to be part of Hamas now. We want to join Gaza. So we're going to vote to join Gaza. Do you think that would justify in any way, shape, or form Hamas coming in and attacking America in order to liberate the Colombian protesters who have decided that, oh, we want to be part of Gaza now?
It's disanalogous, and I'll explain why. A better analogy would be, let's imagine if Canada had an unconstitutional coup that was undemocratic and was against the will of the vote that had just happened, let's say. And there were parts of Canada that were thus disenfranchised because, like many countries, certain areas tend to vote for certain candidates more than others. And then on top of that, this new illegal government...
I'm not sure if I can even finish this. Like, this is already, like, fucking pissing me off, okay? Like, I might not be showing it, but I fucking hate these fucking Russian bot talking points. Like, they fucking irk me the fuck out of...
reached out to Russia and attempted to join SISTO and attempted to put Russian missiles on the border with the U.S. As a great power, it is myopic to think that the U.S. wouldn't do anything. The tanks are rolling in the next day. We were willing to end the world over the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962, despite the fact that we had invaded Cuba.
I'm fucking angry right now, really? Yes. Tell me more.
In the Bay of Pigs just a year prior. There are certain lines that great powers, red lines that they have, and one of them
The reason why I'm kind of like livid in my soul right now, okay, obviously I'm not showing it, okay, but I am. But I'm just saying LactoidTV here is very slimy. He's very intentional and he's very slimy with his talking points, okay? He is deliberately bad faith, okay?
And Russia's made it clear, Ukraine, for many reasons, is one of the red lines here. They made that clear before the invasion, and they made it clear since.
The question I have is why Ukraine? What about literally any other country?
Well, I
about
do
Burma?
think we should. I do think we should support Taiwan, for example, as another country where I think we should draw red lines and we should not let imperial powers come in and start taking chunks. And the reason why is because it's in our interest. And these are the key words. Ukraine is in our interest because Ukraine is connected to a lot of European countries. We have Ukraine isn't just the only country that borders Russia. You have Estonia bordering Russia. You have the Balkans, right? And you have, well, now Finland and Sweden and things, but they weren't part of NATO before the invasion. But this matters because the reason why a lot of countries in 2004 joined NATO was because they foresaw this Russian imperial aggression that was coming. They were worried over.
Yeah, this is not a good argument from Wick, okay? Again, at the end of the day, because now you're getting into now you're getting into an argument where you're essentially arguing, like, why is Ukraine in our best interest? Why is Ukraine in our interest, right? This should be a supporting argument, not your main argument. Your main argument should be it's a sovereign nation with its own people, with its own culture that's been invaded by an aggressive force, and joining NATO is not an aggressive action. That should be the argument, okay? WhickTV kind of stumbled here, and I have no doubt that Lactoid is going to take advantage of this. We'll see.
Their sovereignty, and they wanted protection from that. So if we abandon Ukraine, what that does is it sends a signal to our allies that are our actually allies, the NATO allies that we have, that, you know what, if it costs too much, then maybe we're going to abandon them too. And that creates a very dangerous situation.
But Ukraine is not an ally of the United States.
Ukraine can be, and I think it should be.
Sure, but that's not what I'm asking. Because it's not. And so it's understandable what you're saying, that if, say, Lithuania saw an incursion from, Russia brought troops into Belarus, and then, or Kaliningrad started launching incursions through the border, Kaliningrad. Yeah. But Ukraine's not an ally, nor are they a member of NATO, nor the EU. So for what is the reason the U.S. intervened in this regard?
Again, because it's in our interest.
What are those interests?
Sure.
Yeah. I think Wick fucked up here, and this is gonna be really bad. I think Wick needs to bring it back. I think Wick needs to realize that he fucked up here, and he needs to realize that he needs to bring it the fuck back because yeah, this is a fuck up. Okay.
One of our interests,
the military-industrial complex. That was one of the things he mentioned, creating American
Fucking
jobs.
hell,
It's a way
Wick.
that we can.
That is
on
one.
The military-industrial complex.
That is one of our interests. But another of our interests is create stability in this region. Because if Ukraine falls, like we talk about the cost of supporting Ukraine.
By the way, you can argue this. It's fine to argue this, but you need to have far more knowledge of the situation than I believe Wick has. Okay, you need to argue why it's a better interest than other countries, because now you can just argue like, oh, we have no interest in protecting Ukraine because Ukraine is under attack right now. We would rather not draw ire from Russia, right? If Ukraine is under attack, you can also argue, okay, what about the other, why can't we protect other countries rather than Ukraine? Ukraine's too corrupt, right? Like there's so many other, you need to know so much. You need to know so much to back up this point, rather than the very simple argument that this is a sovereign country who has declared independence. It has independence, and we don't like it when things aggress first, okay? When Russia aggresses first, we should recognize that.
Right. We got to talk about the cost of not supporting Ukraine. What happens if we abandon Ukraine and Ukraine falls? What happens to our interests? What happens to the cost to American consumers? Trade, we have about $1 trillion, a little less, a year with Europe in trade. And if that is disrupted, right, it just hurts our wealth at home.
What would disrupt that?
So, for example, if Ukraine falls, a lot of our European allies will see us as unreliable. And I'll give you an example of this happening. When Trump paused the aid that was going to Ukraine, cut off intelligence and things like that, the EU began to question its purchases that it was making from us.
Oh my gosh, Wick, just bring it back. Just bring it back. Say it was a bad argument and bring it back, okay? Because I'm going to tell you this right now, okay? This is not it, okay? This is not the argument you want to make, period. All right? I'm sorry. It's just not the it's just not the argument that I think Wick wants to make, okay? Just, oh, fucking hell, this is horrible. All right, just he needs to stop pronto, all right? No joke.
When it comes to us, it has granted them. So the EU has talked about they are no longer going to want to source some of the parts that they get for their munitions and their things from us because we are no longer reliable. They're setting up. I'm not sure if it's in place yet, but they're setting up a system where they buy from themselves because they realize that, oh, maybe under this regime,
It doesn't
You got to keep in mind that Lactoid and Tim Pool are Russian cum sock guzzlers. Okay, so you know he's got a little bit more crafty than this.
sound like that's
okay?
related to Ukraine, though.
it
Sounds like it's
is.
related to Trump's trade issues.
No, this was before the trade issues.
So you're saying that
This is before the trade imports and anything like this. This is when Trump canceled or paused, I should say, the aid we were giving to Ukraine that we had already allocated to give to Ukraine. He paused that, so it wasn't coming in. He also canceled the intelligence sharing that we were doing. And again, like Europe is on this doorstep, and a lot of Europe are our allies, and they see and they're watching how America is going to support them, because by supporting Ukraine, we are supporting them. We are making the world safer for them, and that's a direct benefit. It is not a wild assertion.
Wild assertion. They're not an ally, as Tim said. They're not an ally, right? You're saying they could be an ally, and I understand that U.S. aid and several other.
But you understand that, like
interests
Estonia is our ally.
Estonia is our ally. They're a NATO ally,
Right?
and I would agree.
The Netherlands is our ally.
For sure.
France is our ally, correct?
Anastasia should absolutely come on, in my opinion. Yeah, I agree with that. Anastasia would fucking crush them. Okay, but definitely not Wick. Fucking hell. God, I don't know if I want to watch any more of this. Fuck. It's just too painful. I hate watching Wick argue so incompetently against two fucking Russian dick suckers.
They are all wanting us. They're all wanting us to support Ukraine.
Well, I'm sure they are. That's less money that they have to spend. I'm sure they all want us.
They're all ramping up their money.
Good.
What are you talking about? They are ramping up their money and spending.
I don't control their money. Okay, if they want to spend money, I can't stop. I don't think it's a good idea, but I can't stop them. But if you're saying, oh, they want us to spend this money, I'm sure they do, right? I don't think that we should. Not only for the reasons that I outlined before, but because you're openly talking about, well, it's in our interest because of the military industrial complex.
And our interest makes Americans safer, and it makes the world safer.
No, it's in our interest.
American hegemony has made the world a safer place.
Ukraine,
a better.
Oh god, now he's fucking wicking out. It's fucking Jover, boys. Okay, he's wicking out. My boy, he's wicking out. Okay, it's fucking Jover. It's Jover when he wicks out.
You really think
not just for America?
You really think Ukraine was more stable or less stable after? Do you think it was more stable, or sorry? Do you think
it was more stable or less stable after Russia invaded? I think it was less stable.
Hold on. Do you think Ukraine was more stable after 2014 than before?
Of course not.
Okay. What happened in 2014?
In 2014, Russian sent little green men into Crimea.
What happened before then?
They locked down, right? They locked down the parliament so no one can get in. Men with guns, right?
What happened before then?
They forced a vote.
What happened before then?
100. Let me read the exact resolution here. That's why I took some notes.
I'm sorry.
UN Resolution 68262, right? The invalid referendum on 16th of March 2014, where Crimea declared its independence and joined Russia. This was obviously
why'd you put that in scare quotes?
Because it was, again, as the UN resolution says, invalid.
You're saying it's
we
invalid.
Recognize it's invalid.
I'm asking you why was it invalid?
It was done under duress.
Was it?
Because Russians sent their little green men in. They brought guns. They locked down the parliament. They forced the vote. What's little green men? So they have rip off their badge, right? So they're not actually Russian soldiers, and they go in and they do their thing, and they have some plausible deniability, which people like my comrade Lactoid here will say, oh, that's obviously not the Russians, it's just some paramilitary.
I want to educate Wick a little bit on this. So obviously there were Russians there. I'm not denying that the little green men were Russians, obviously.
Russian soldiers,
yes, of course, from Sevastopol, for sure.
With guns that were threatening force.
Yep.
Okay.
But when I asked you before, what happened?
I don't think Lactoid is a lawyer like he claims to be. Yeah, no shit. Okay, nobody thinks he's a lawyer except for people who think he's a lawyer. Okay, like I think vast majority of people who thinks he's a fucking bullshit lawyer.
Before then, I think it's telling that you're just ignoring all the context, as is usual with this conversation. Before you cut me off again, that is usual with this conversation. There's it just happened, right? There's this it just came out of the sky. This invasion just came out of the sky. When in reality, what happened is Crimea had for years wanted to leave Ukraine. In fact, in 1992 they declared independence. Ukraine said you better nullify that within a week with the threat of force. So then they were like, okay, fine, we're not gonna leave.
And then Chechnya, that's Russia.
We can talk about Chechnya in a second because I also know about Chechnya. But then in 2014, in 2010, there was a president elected in Ukraine, Yanukovych, and in 2014 he was.
Again, Yanukovych was a dictator. He was overthrown by the people, all right, for being a fucking asshole, all right? And it's justified, morally upright upthrowing, okay?
Do you deny that he was unconstitutionally couped?
No, but that doesn't matter.
Why?
Yeah, but he was also ruling like a fucking asshole, okay? So, no. Like, fuck.
Why doesn't it matter?
That doesn't matter.
Why doesn't the votes of Koreans matter? Does them being disenfranchised matter?
It doesn't give Russia the right to come in with guns, tanks, and material and force the issue. Russia or any other nation does.
Okay, not this, okay? I think, again, WhickTV messed up here again, okay? He should be arguing that the coup was justified, okay? That's where he should be arguing from.
not have the right to come in with force
So
and
Crimea just-
violate
so
someone's
Crimeans
sovereignty
just gotta sit and take it?
to solve an internecine conflict. There are other ways to deal with that.
What
and
way?
Russia did this
What way should
with
Crimea?
military force.
What way should Crimea have handled it?
Any other way but this?
What way?
Because Crimea didn't handle it. Russia did.
What way?
Russia took away their choice.
Why did Russia go into Crimea?
Because it's been part of their plan. They want Ukraine. Putin's wanted Ukraine for a while.
No, but why Crimea?
Crimea had pronunciation's hard. There's ports in there that gives them access to the what they call warm water
Was he
ports,
gonna say
right? Because they don't
Sevastopol?
have a lot of those, and it gives them access, and they can use their navies and things like that.
It's the home of the Russian Black Sea Fleet and their only warm water port.
And they're primarily Russians in Crimea as well.
But that wasn't under threat, right?
Of course it was.
Why? What was the threat?
Because-
they had a lease.
Yeah, I'll explain to you why it was under threat. Okay, it was under threat for a couple of reasons. But when you have the pro-Russian president get unconstitutionally couped in 2014, and now you have this country which prior had promised to not.
He should argue that the coup was justified and the constitutionality of it does not matter. This is what he should
is
argue.
now looking towards NATO, right?
Fuck.
There is a concern that if they join NATO,
Kill me.
you're saying that, but that's how do you, as a geopolitical actor, how do you know that for sure? Especially when you
I
have
need more than just a possibility. I need reasonable.
you had a coup. You had a coup. How can you trust this new government when they ignored their own constitution? They ignored Article 108. They ignored Article 111, and they disenfranchised millions of people, millions of Crimeans. And by the way, the UN had done polling in Crimea prior to this and found that most Crimeans would vote to leave Ukraine and join Russia. This was between 2009
we'll
and
never
2011.
know for sure if
and
they
Pew
would,
Research
because the vote they
So Lactoid's argument here is bad. It's wrong. Okay. The reason for this is because now you can argue, oh, does California have the right to leave the US if California votes to leave the US? I mean, if he says yes to this, then it's fine. All right. Does Texas have the right to leave the US if Texas votes to leave the US? Right? It's almost as if that this shouldn't be something that's on the ballot, right? It's almost as if like something like, I mean, like hell, fuck it, you know? If somebody does vote to leave or something like that, but like fuck it. But like at the same time, again, all right, you know, yeah. Actually, no, the equivalent of this is if California agrees to vote to leave the US to join Canada, would the US allow it? So it's not that California becomes an independent country, it becomes part of a greater state, right? Obviously, the answer is, you know, I think somebody like Trump would say no. I think Lactoid would also say no, right? So it's like, so of course it doesn't seem like people should be able to do that, right? It's fucking bullshit. So just because a group, because otherwise you can justify moving in a bunch of people that agree one way and then they will vote one way, because again, you can artificially move populations into a zone in order to influence a vote, right?
Well, hold on.
vote they had was conducted
I'm
under
almost done.
coercive
I'm
force.
almost done.
He's fucking up. He's fucking up. He's
a few-
fucking
like
up.
I think less
He's
than 2
fucking
months
up.
following
He's
the
fucking up.
annexation of
He's
Crimea
fucking
into
up.
Russia, Pew
Fuck me,
Research
dude.
went in
Fuck
and
me.
did a poll,
Fuck me.
and
Fuck me.
88%
Fuck
of
me.
Crimeans
Fuck me.
said that Kiev
Fuck
should
me.
recognize the
Fuck me.
result.
Fuck me.
Only
Fuck me.
4%
Fuck me.
said
Fuck
no,
me.
which
Get
is
me out.
relatively
Get
in
me out.
line with what the
Get
referendum
me out.
was.
They were occupied by Russian forces.
Okay, so
don't say no.
When
I'm out, folks. Have fun. I'm probably gonna be done soon too. Okay. Telosi. Bye.
they weren't occupied, they wanted to leave Ukraine and join Russia. What about that?
Through a poll.
Through a UN
poll
poll.
isn't a
This is
vote.
painful.
A UN, because
If
Ukraine
you
wouldn't let
are
them have a
wanting
vote.
to-
They
if
tried
you
to have
are
a vote in
wanting to
1992,
secede,
and Ukraine
you
said
need more
no.
than just someone calling you up on the phones like, "Hey, buddy, do you want to secede from your country?" You need an actual constitutional Congress. You need something actual.
Would
there.
Ukraine
But
let them have that vote?
At the end of the day,
Yeah.
none of this justifies Russia coming in.
Of course it does.
And of course it does
course it
not. We
does.
would never let that happen in any other situation.
Ukraine
Russia
didn't let them
did
vote.
not let that
No, no,
happen.
no,
When
Okay.
Chechnya tried to secede, right? And when the Warsaw Pact broke apart, when the USSR broke apart,
Mm-hmm.
and Chechnya said, "Okay, we want to go away too." At the time, they were like, "No way, Jose!" And they came in with military force.
So you support
and
that?
Stomped them down. I absolutely do not, because of the way they handled that.
Whoa!
Again, as if you listen to that, because of the way they handled that.
What way did they handle it then?
Gross human violations of their rights.
The Ukrainians do that in the Donbass?
No.
No. So
No.
when Amnesty
And you know
says
why?
when Amnesty says that they were committing war crimes by firing unguided rockets in civilian areas, that's just thousands of people dead. Who cares?
So the IC oh, go ahead.
You brought up the vote from Crimea, and so I've been looking into it. I have a question for you. In the 2010 election in Ukraine, which you mentioned,
Yes.
Viktor Yanukovych won 49.55% against Yulia Tymoshenko, who won 46.03.
Yes.
The country was split from the east to the west,
Yep.
with the west largely, and this includes Kiev, largely being in favor of Tymoshenko, and the right being in favor of Yanukovych. Yanukovych had his political opposition after this arrested and held for 3 years in prison.
Yes.
In 2011, Yulia Tymoshenko was arrested for what is largely seen as political persecution and held for 3 years until Yanukovych was ousted.
Sure. And so
And not to mention,
and hold on.
during
Let me respond to that.
Euromaidan, right?
Okay,
the
why not?
brutalities that Yanukovych.
Wait, did Tim Pool just make a point against him? Did Tim Pool just make a point against Lactoid? was Tim Pool giving like giving WhickTV a saving grace? Am I wrong here? What did he just say? He just said like Yanukovych fucking like locked up his political opponent, right?
Was perpetrated on his
That's
people.
what he just said.
108 protesters killed brutally.
And 13 cops were killed. So in terms of the political, I guess, oppression that
Throwing
came
him a bone,
following
yeah.
Yanukovych's election, I'm sure there's criticisms you can levy. I know Yanukovych had issues with corruption.
Again, this is the same Tim Pool. This is the same Tim Pool that's been paid by Russia, okay? Just FYI, okay? FYI, this is the same Tim Pool that's been paid by Russia, all right?
I know that, in fact, Ukraine now has issues with corruption. But just because there are those issues doesn't mean that you can trample upon your own constitution to remove a president and not expect separatism in the places, as you brought up, in the places that overwhelmingly voted for Yanukovych. In Crimea and the Donbass, it was overwhelmingly pro-Yanukovych. Do their votes not matter? Do you just get to replace this president in 2014
Luctoid,
with somebody that was not democratically elected, ignore your own constitution? This is what led to the separatism, and the separatism and this new power structure in Ukraine, and this new power structure in separatism is what led to the 2022 invasion.
Well, let me ask you this. Had the U.S. backed and really wanted, right, Yanukovych, political enemy that he jailed for 3 years unconstitutionally, right? If he had wanted, if we
Well, you don't know the
really,
details
really
about that,
wanted,
and you don't either.
If he had really wanted, and I'll go with the hypothetical that what Tim just said was accurate and that was seen and pretty much seen as shady, as illegal, etc. So go with it. Run with me on this. Would that give us, the U.S., the right to go in with gun, tanks, men, and occupy and seek to annex parts of Ukraine? Would that have given us the right to do that? I don't believe you. I don't believe you if you say that you think that we would have that.
I think we've talked about matters of scale.
Matters of scale.
Yeah, no, for sure. Let me explain. In the event that the Constitution was violated, which we don't know if it was, I mean, we had an arrest warrant for Yanukovych issued in 2014, immediately after he left the country. You do have a history.
Fled the country. Yes.
He left. Yeah, you can say he fled because his car was shot at. If there's a constitutional issue with that, you can say there's major issues. You can, in fact, even potentially, if it's bad enough, if there's enough repression, that could potentially justify an invasion based on humanitarian reasons. There is, unless you want to say,
look,
well, hold on. Unless you want to say,
I'll say this.
Hold on a second. Unless you want to say, well, we can't invade a country even if like there's gross humanitarian violations, and then that means you can't, invading Nazi Germany is out of the question, the Confederate South.
What I'm saying.
So you can, if there's enough violations of the Constitution and human rights that could justify potentially humanitarian intervention.
Human rights.
But what I'm saying is this Euromaidan was particularly egregious. We have a movement that, according to the last poll prior to the ousting of Yanukovych, had about 45% popularity and 48% unpopularity, primarily in the East. And you had the president removed, violating Article 108 and Article 111. And you had separatism. Well, to some extent, it does. The United States had help from France. We had a General Lafayette come in to help us leave the UK. Let me ask you this: does the U.S. because we argued no taxation without representation, and I think nullifying your vote is essentially removing representation. Do the U.S. have a right to leave the UK, the England? Do we have a right to declare independence?
Sure, they were doing more than just that. They were disappearing people. They were giving people no trial. They were just taking them off the street, right? But here's the deal: we don't live in 1700s anymore, and we're dealing in a world that is fundamentally different than back then. And to pretend that we're going to live by the same rules that we did back in 1700, I think is folly. Look, none of this justifies, and this is a principle, right? That a country's sovereignty matters, and a foreign entity cannot use military force in order to violate another.
Okay, good. Wick is bringing it back. Okay, Wick is bringing it back.
The country's sovereignty in order to solve a crisis that they themselves have helped serve up. Because let me, if I may finish, Russia has a habit of doing this. Russia has done this before. They did it in Georgia. They took an internecine conflict that was in South Ossetia and can't pronounce. Abkhazia. Thank you. And they pumped money into them. They sent their little green men in there again, their little Russian soldiers, and they stirred up this conflict. Again, remarkably similar to how they behaved in Ukraine with the Donbass and with Crimea and these things. And they use this as an excuse, right, to go in with military force and take a slice, right? And today, even today, they occupy illegally 20% of Georgians' sovereign territory. Russia, and Putin specifically, continues to do this, and they play this game. So this idea that if we just stop funding Ukraine, it's not our problem, he's just going to stop, has not been borne out by the facts of the matter. If someone continues to exhibit a habit of behavior over and over and over again, what is different this time? Let me ask you this, Simon.
You listed 2 times. That's less than the U.S. has intervened in other countries. We invaded Iraq. We invaded Afghanistan. We got involved in Libya.
We didn't annex Afghanistan. We didn't annex
we replaced
Iraq.
the government.
But that's a fundamentally different
to a pro-Western government.
And again, I'm not here to support every single thing that the United States has done. And I'm not here to support
every single thing the Russian government has done.
Okay, dude. You know, it's actually, if it weren't for the fact that like we're talking about like literal Russian propaganda here that's being spewed by Lactoid, I would have been charmed by the fact that Lactoid and WhickTV are bickering like an old couple. All right, but shit.
I'm not. You can point out. And by the way, I'm actually critical of the Russian government when it comes to Chechnya. I think it's surprising that you're not, because, or that you are. Sorry, I think it's surprising that you are critical
about to say, do you
of
not
the
think
Russian government in Chechnya, because the same arguments.
genocide,
Yeah.
man.
Well, it's a little. It's not. I mean, no, it wasn't a genocide. But it was an annexation of a area that wanted self-determination, wanted to be separate because the Soviet Union had just collapsed. But under your logic of the countries are sovereign, we can't get involved, you should be against
Wait, do you think
Chechnya.
that
Because
the
Chechnya
US
was
should
part
have-
of the Russian government,
Hold on.
wasn't it?
Do
It
you
was part of the Russian
think
territory.
the U.S. should have gone in Chechnya?
Probably not.
Probably not.
Hold on.
Indeed.
Just because of the expense and the kind of
From a moral
perspective, we would have been justified.
I think
Yeah,
we would have been justified.
we would have strong justification.
Again, until the like the Balkans, right? When we went in, when NATO went in the 90s, right, and stopped the Serbian genocide that was happening there, that the Serbians were conducting, right?
NATO offensive.
Yes, that was good. That was something we should have done, right? And when it comes to the war crimes, like we talk about when war crimes justify intervention. Look at Bucha. What happened in Bucha? 498 civilians massacred. Does that justify the
Bucha.
U.S. getting involved? I think it does. Look at what they've done by stealing 20,000, at least, children, Ukrainian children, and disappearing them into Russia to serve with Russian families, to live with Russian families, and to be raised as Russian against the will of their parents.
Can you even
does
state,
that justify?
Can you even
does that justify U.S.
Hold on. When you say against the will of their parents, what do you mean?
I mean that the parents, they're not allowed to see the kids.
Is that what's happening?
That is.
Do you even know what the Russian argument is on that?
I don't care why
They're
they're
orphans.
doing it. It's wrong.
They're orphans, and if the parents are identified.
No. Oh my god, dude. Lactoid. Oh god, this guy is a Russian propaganda machine. He's an actual Russian propaganda machine. Guys, viewers, you guys actually know about this. Do you guys remember watching this documentary, this short video on YouTube about like by this German news network about how parents' children were literally whisked away, about how they weren't orphaned? It wasn't because they're orphaned. It's because they were literally, it was orphans, and it was actual children of parents that were or not orphaned, okay? So again, okay? Like, fuck me, dude. Dude, Lactoid is so fucking dishonest. He's actually so dishonest. He's lying, guys. He's lying. This is how you can tell Lactoid is lying, okay? Because there's no way he would know about that Russian propaganda talking point if he didn't also know about the fact that there were actual children that were whisked away, that had parents that were living, documented parents. So no, it's just he's a liar. He's a Russian bot. Lactoid is a Russian bot, okay? Lactoid is a Russian bot, okay? All right, fuck, I'm so angry.
They ship them back to Ukraine. They're
They
orphans.
compre-
They're orphans.
That is not true.
It is absolutely true. They're orphans in combat zones.
That is not true.
They are orphans in combat zones. That is 100% true. Now, you could say, well, Russia has an obligation to send the orphans to Ukraine. That could be a discussion. But again,
Wait, it's
hold
not
on,
a discussion.
hold on,
It's just
hold
the
on,
fact that they
hold on. The framing
absolutely-
here, the
Do you not
framing
think
here.
children should be reunited with their families if we're able?
Wick, they're orphans. They don't have
Hold on.
families. They don't have families.
In cases,
And if they
their parents are
Okay,
saying, "Give us
you
back,"
know-
and every month when they identify parents, they do send them back.
they are making
is
it
happening
very,
every
very hard
See,
to
you're
identify
all over the
parents.
place. First-
I'm not all over
No,
the
no,
place.
you
You
are
are all over the place.
No, first
Again,
is-
let me ask you one.
No. Tim Pool didn't set Wick up, okay? Wick is just sometimes a fucking moron, okay?
More
saying-
time.
let me
because
ask you
keep
one more
not
time.
asking- You keep not answering the question. Does the Bucha massacre justify? Because you have agreed that violations of human rights allow us or allow a foreign country to go in
I agree.
militarily.
Oh, no, what
right?
came over
so
me.
if Bucha's not enough for you, is them snatching these 20,000 orphans, as you call them, off the streets and disappearing them into the Russia? Is that not enough for you? What about all the other war crimes that have been recognized by the UN, by the ICJ, by the OSCE, right? By these other human rights watchdog groups that they know is happening in Russian-occupied Ukrainian territories, where they are forcing Ukrainian citizens to become Russian, get a Russian passport, and then they conscript.
Okay, I'm super serious on this, okay? I think Wick should learn how to, yeah, I think Wick should learn how to debate, okay? Like, I think he should spend more time studying how to become a good debater. I think it will actually benefit him a lot. I think this is something that he should seriously learn how to do, okay? Like, if you're going to be appearing on Tim Pool, I'm sorry, if you're willing to appear on Tim Pool, you need to learn how to
the
do
men
it, okay?
and
Like,
send them
seriously.
off to fight against Ukraine. Does that not justify?
Whoa, hold on. We got a problem with conscription now? Okay, we got a couple questions here.
Yes, if you are making someone...
Wick, please. A couple points here. First of all, you didn't know what was going on with the orphans. You were saying, oh, the children are being...
This is absolutely happening.
Wick, for God's sake. You made the claim, oh, all these children and their parents are begging for them back. And
in a lot of cases, yes.
And this is happening in the majority or the vast majority of cases. That's what was implied. The reality is they're orphans in a combat zone, and they're being moved out of the combat zone. There's a genuine discussion to be had as to whether or not the orphans should be sent to Ukraine or whether or not they should be sent.
Pure Russian propaganda. It's just not true. It's just not true.
I let you finish, didn't I? Whether they should be sent to safer places, I did. Whether they should be sent to safer places deeper within Russia, away from the combat zone. I understand that Russia has annexed those.
WhickTV should say like, oh, where he got these sources from. That's what he should do. He should say, oh, by the way, the German broadcasting news reported, X and Y organization reports it. The only place I know from is the German thing. Okay, all right, and these guys are pretty credible. Okay, but like I'm just saying. Okay, like you should state some sources. Okay, because you can easily state some sources off the top of your head. It's not hard. Okay, it's not hard. Okay.
Areas, and there are people there now who the Russian government considers to be Russian citizens. And I also understand there's conscription occurring. The Ukrainian government is also conscripting people who don't want to fight. There's plenty of videos you can find right now of vans pulling up, grabbing people off the street, forcing them into the front line. A big reason why this is happening is, a big reason this is happening is because Ukraine is suffering from a critical manpower shortage, which is one of the reasons why it's one of the reasons why they are losing.
Okay,
now
hold on.
You laid out like 8 points.
They're suffering a critical manpower shortage probably because Russia is being a fucking aggressor. Probably because they're trying to defend their country to the death. Maybe it's justified to actually have conscription services. Maybe it's actually okay to force people to go fight if your country is in fucking danger. Like, hello? Yeah, there are things that are perfectly acceptable. Yeah, there are reasons why you should force people to go fight. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock.
You want to talk about the Butcher Massacre?
You keep talking about things, and we keep needing to address them because you bring up points that are just demonstrative.
Kill me.
And I wait for you to figure out.
No, you do not, sir. So the Army General Christopher G. Cavoli met April 3rd, right? He's the commander of EUCOM. He's the Supreme Allied Commander of NATO forces, right? He sat down in front of a session of Congress, right? An open session of Congress, and he talked about the Ukraine situation. This is very recent. In this, he testified, right? And I think he would be in a better position to know than you or I, considering the access to the intel he has,
You'd
right?
Also be biased.
Right?
He's involved in NATO, isn't he?
Okay, yes, but he has the duty to tell the truth. He's biased because he's a NATO general, right? He's testified that Ukraine has solved its manpower issues, and right, and it is currently in a better position today than it was last year.
I suppose my issue with this conversation so far is I still don't understand why I should care about Ukraine. You guys are arguing humanitarian issues. You want to talk about China and humanitarian issues? We can do that. I'm unmoved by the plight of a country that has nothing to do with us.
I think you're just incorrect when you say it has nothing to do with us. Again, our allies, Taiwan, for example.
So we should invade China.
Why?
Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, Vietnam, these countries rely on us as well.
I think if
China's been invading the South China Sea and sinking Vietnamese fishing vessels, they're building military bases. Should we invade mainland China?
If they invade Taiwan, yes.
Well,
they have a bright red line.
They took over Hong Kong.
We have a bright red. They took over Hong Kong.
There were mass protests trying to shut it down.
Sure, but the
Hong Kong was
British government had made a contract to give it back in so many years. That was a legal thing.
Is that the authority of a foreign government to tell Hong Kong that they give up their rights?
The Hong Kong citizens, if you want.
The Hong Kong citizens aren't beholden to the will of the Crown of England. So when the protesters in Hong Kong started saying, we do not want the rule of mainland China, and China sent in tanks to crush them.
Yeah, that was wrong. That was horrible.
So like with Crimea, should the U.S. now get involved and support the people of Hong Kong and Southeast Asia in incursions against mainland China?
If we could send aid into Hong Kong, do you think we should? If we could send monetary aid to help smuggle people out, do you think we should do that?
Should the U.S. send...
well, can you answer my question?
I'll ask you a question first.
Sure.
Right. Should we sink the flagship of the Chinese fleet in the South China Sea?
If they invade Taiwan, yes. Again,
the people of Hong Kong did not vote for that.
Characterizing as an invasion is a little bit different. It's a different context.
They sent in tanks.
Again,
the people fought back against it, and they started disappearing them.
Horrible.
So what's the difference between Crimea and Hong Kong?
So in Crimea, there was no contract, right? So in Hong Kong, the British government...
You said there was a lease that Russia had.
With Sevastopol, which is...
Okay, fuck me, dude. No, the argument is the same. Okay. Nobody should come in to help Hong Kong. That's the argument that should be made. I'm sorry. I know, it sounds really harsh, okay? But it's the same thing. Just like how nobody should come into he just has the wrong opinion here. Fuck me, dude. Like, because otherwise you have to be consistent, right? Otherwise, Russia shouldn't fucking, interfere.
The military. Sorry,
Russia had in Crimea were already leased to have been in there at the Black Sea port.
but not
so
to
Russia-
blockade the
All hail the glorious CCP. Long live the Han Dynasty, guys.
Ukrainian military bases there, not to lock down parliament there. Again, the British, as I understand it, and again, I'm not an expert on China by any means, but the British had agreement with the government of China that in 100 years that we're going to give back Hong Kong into China's hands. And the day came, and they did that. Now, I'm with you. China has done horrible things to the protesters in Hong Kong, horrible things indeed, and there might be an argument. Yes, absolutely.
Our interests, I think, are very much at risk with China right now, considering the seizures, the atolls they've built, and their declaration of ownership of the South China Sea.
Would you think it's beneficial then for us to stymie China's allies to hurt China's allies? Do you think making China's allies weaker would be in our best interest in the United States?
No.
No, why not? We're about to.
Because the reason I asked the question is that.
I understand that's the reason you asked your question.
The reason we asked the question is that we have multiple conflicts around the world, and my point was when you guys are debating the humanitarian issues of Ukraine, I'm sitting here being like, I literally.
Little sister drawing stuff to try to impress the older sister. She's not at all interested. Was trying to be kind either ways for real. The dynamic at play between who?
Don't care. No, like you're arguing with him. He's saying, you're saying we should be involved, and you're saying, but there's humanitarian issues. I know you're arguing other things too, but in that context, I'm just like, I literally don't care.
Let me explain my position a little bit more.
Oh, yeah, sure.
I think perhaps there's some agreement that me and Wick have on the extremes, which is that if you have a sufficient humanitarian crisis or a sufficient erosion of democratic principles or constitutional principles, that could justify intervention in certain circumstances. I think we all believe that, right? Like,
no.
Okay, intervention in Nazi Germany, we all agree.
I mean,
stop them from doing what they were doing.
The issue with Nazi Germany goes beyond humanitarian issues. The U.S. did not invade.
You ready for my hot take? I think we should intervene, but only because it's so bad we have to. I don't know. Isn't America kind of involved around the world in a lot of conflicts? Yeah, kind of, yeah. Hey, Foods, hope you're doing well. Yeah, I'm doing
well. So does Ukraine and so does China.
The U.S. did not storm the beaches of Normandy because of the Holocaust.
But if we knew about the Holocaust, and even if Germany wasn't doing all the other things that we invaded them for, I think that would have been sufficient reason to invade Germany.
So we should invade China now?
No,
I mean, they're giving forced abortions to Uyghur women.
Let me explain. I'm not saying that we should invade China now. I understand there's a lot of it's a different
How
situation.
Dare you? How dare you? China would never do such a thing. How dare you accuse China of such horrendous action? How dare you? Sorry.
Factors that are involved. But what I'm saying is that if you do reach a certain threshold, I think, and it's possible to intervene, I think that there is a justification to do so. The question here is, does Ukraine deserve U.S. intervention? Is it worth $200 billion? What are we getting out of this? What's Ukraine getting out of this, right? And
Ukraine's getting the right to exist.
From what I see is that really what's happening is, you said something a while ago that I thought was actually kind of profound. Your belief on the Israel-Palestine conflict is that Palestine needs to be allowed to lose. I sort of believe that about this as well. I think that by giving Ukraine weapons at this point, all we're doing is we might be slowing the progress of the Russian military to some extent, but it's dramatically increasing the casualties, and the end result's going to be the same.
You may believe that, but that is demonstrably untrue by the facts of the matter. But I want to talk.
And it's not even a country.
Again,
it's an authoritarian.
That's not true.
No, it is.
You keep saying things.
You can look this up. You can look this up.
The people who have much more access.
Do I think we should invade Gaza?
Should we invade Gaza?
No, absolutely not.
But why not? There's a humanitarian crisis.
Again, there are levels of intervention, and this is why I asked you the question earlier about Hong Kong. Well, in this case, would you be okay not with military intervention, but with us intervening with aid money? Do you think that
for Hong Kong?
For Hong Kong, yes.
I don't think we should be involved in it at all.
At all.
Yeah, at all.
Right. Well, this is where I disagree. I think that let me ask, are you an isolationist? I don't actually know.
What does that mean?
An isolationist is someone who doesn't want foreign involvements at all. So, for example, okay. So let me ask your line then. At what point would it be sufficient? What do you care about? What would you care about in a foreign land that says, okay, the U.S. needs to get involved in this?
What does it mean by involved?
Whatever you think it means.
So, like a trade negotiation?
Perhaps
we're buying rare earths from China, so we negotiate a trade agreement.
You should define
so if there's a conflict in China, for example, with the Uyghur Muslims, would that be something you should care about? That hey, we need to stop this from happening?
Yeah, that's a coin toss. I don't know that the U.S. involved in a conflict which could escalate to kinetic conflict, for which it's not a priority of the United States. There's an argument of, wow, it is really bad what they're doing. So maybe we just don't do business there. Maybe it's that simple. Maybe
that's a form of intervention.
Not really.
It actually is, though.
Saying I'm not going to buy bread from you is not me kicking your door in at your grocery store.
You're saying I'm not going to buy bread for you unless you change this.
It's called a boycott.
I understand, but
there's
it is
nothing
a form
wrong with
intervention. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying
that's an extremely absurd definition of intervention.
I don't agree.
Okay, well then let's define this between kinetic intervention and purchasing boycotts.
There's a whole host of other types of intervention that we can do when we talk about
So
this.
we're talking about, should the U.S. engage in forms of warfare, such as sanctions or kinetic conflict, psychological operations, cyber warfare, etc.? The answer is no. Should we stop buying from them? Yep. Yeah, if there's a guy who he's got animals and he's a butcher and he tortures the animals before he kills them, I ain't buying from him. I'm not intervening. I'm just saying I'm not going to.
Let me
That guy's
ask you
crazy.
this: do you think there's any foreign situation where you would be in favor of the U.S. using a kinetic intervention?
Probably.
Can you give me an example?
Yeah, like the most difficult position is, should we have gotten involved in World War II? When you have a expansionist power
Stop
that
them
is
now.
Ethnically nationalistic, authoritarian, we did not
Like
know.
Russia, but go ahead.
I mean, it's a bit extreme considering the Holocaust,
True.
but we didn't know the Holocaust was happening before we invaded. There was speculation,
no.
there were concerns, but that's not the reason for the U.S.'s intervention,
Okay.
and it wasn't until afterwards. But you basically had the collapse of Europe. The expansion, and don't forget, Nazi Germany was in North Africa, not to mention the Italy, not to mention Japan. So this was a global war for which the U.S. largely stayed out of until the final few years. So even in the minds of the Americans, we should not be involved. It actually wasn't until we were attacked that we decided to actually get involved, which is
Do you
interesting.
think we should have gotten involved earlier?
Probably, well,
Do you think it would? Let me ask it this way:
It's a
do you
coin
think it would
toss.
be better for the U.S. and the world had we gotten involved in World War II earlier than we did?
no,
No, why not?
because we don't know what would have.
I feel as though, fuck it. You know what? I'll say it. I think it's justified to invade a country if they're doing genocide. Fuck it. I'll say it. Okay? But you have to make the case for it. You have to prove it. All right? But at the same time, it's like, yeah, fuck it. I think that Congress should vote to declare war on a country that is doing genocide of their own people or something. Okay? Or of an indigenous population or something. Okay? I think everybody should be on their fucking toes whenever they decide to do something egregiously heinous. Fuck it. Okay. I think that if Congress votes to invade Hong Kong to protect it from China, I support that. I think that if fuck it. About invading countries over genocide, I mean, most nation states aren't engaging in genocide though. Well, yeah, but that's the point, because it's egregiously bad. Invade, yes, invade. Like you initiate conflict, you initiate war. Yeah.
Happened had things played out differently. What we do know is,
Well, intervention and invade. Basically, you bomb them until they stop. Okay.
the time frames by which we acted, we got a result that was largely beneficial
Like, fuck it.
until the prevailing powers created what's called the liberal economic order, which has created instability and chaos for generations.
There's a lot of genocide happening right now. No, that's not true.
And the
I
U.S.
think.
entering a bunch of wars they've never declared. The Constitution of the United States effectively ended in the 50s with these declarations of, say, the IMF, the World Bank, etc. So there's an interesting conversation that actually was lighting up with Douglas Murray and Dave Smith the other day, and it's been one of the principal discussions on foreign policy now. There's a lot of concern over the worldview of people like Daryl Cooper, as well as Dave Smith and others, who have made arguments that Winston Churchill was a bad guy, which I think.
Which ones? Loki, which ones? I could be clueless, okay? I could be clueless. All right, I'm just curious which one. Yeah. But why did you hit my weapon system? Okay, we got a GTFO, okay? We got GTFO out
is
here.
largely silly. I think the circumstances of World War II are the offshoot of World War I. World War I was.
Oh yeah, by the way, Winston Churchill being like the actual villain of World War II is a Nazi talking point, okay? This is a Nazi talking point. It is what it is. It's a Nazi talking point. And yeah. All right, just FYI, if anybody says this, it's a Nazi talking point, okay?
High density nations in dispute for a variety of reasons came to the industrialization of war, which then leads to the wars it was. It's easy to say now 100 years on nearly, I would have done it better. Honestly, I have no idea. So if you were to say, should we have gotten involved earlier? Well, I don't know, because the outcome could have been substantially worse.
Sure.
Right now, what we know is the Nazis were very bad. They were authoritarian. They controlled their economy. They functioned not too.
Palestine, nope, disagree. There's no credible evidence of actual genocide going on. It seems like to some degree Israel is still beholden. Even though lots of people have genocidal mindsets, it doesn't seem like it is the track record of the what are they called? The IDF doesn't seem to be genocidal. Yeah. Ukraine, maybe. Okay, maybe. China Uyghurs, yeah. North Korea, No. So that's probably
The difference between the communists and the fascists and Nazis was largely on their view of culture, traditionalism, and progressivism. So we don't want an expansionist, authoritarian system that takes everything over.
I agree that we don't want.
But the liberal economic order has functioned largely like that, only slightly better in some respects.
I fundamentally disagree with that view. I think the liberal world order has made people more safe, more wealthy, and much better off than it was before. But that's another argument. We're talking about Ukraine, Russia today, and I want to, because you said something there that I do think is interesting, like that we don't want.
Loki, Tim Pool is not dumb. Tim Pool is evil. Okay, say it with me. Evil. All right. Again, he takes money from Russia to spread propaganda. All right. He takes money from a firm called Tenet that is a Russian firm that spreads propaganda. He is paid for by Russia. He's a Russian bot.
Authoritarian expansionist powers, and I would argue that we should have NATO again. There's a difference between expanding at the point of a gun, like Russia does, and there's a difference between expanding, say, hey, you want to join NATO? And there's like, you know what? I would like to join
if that's
NATO.
what had happened. But if you look at the history of Ukraine, that's literally not what happened.
Ukraine isn't joining NATO. It hasn't joined NATO. It wasn't even discussions to join NATO. It got nixed, right? It is now because of Russia's actions, but it's probably not going to happen.
And the conflict is largely predicated upon NATO
But again,
policies.
Once again, you have said that, like, oh, it happens in the case of NATO that it's just the same as Russia doing the guns. But
yeah, again, do you hear this? Do you hear this? He's arguing that because Ukraine wanted to join NATO, that's why Russia invaded. That's not true, okay? It is hard to join NATO. Say it with me. It is difficult to join NATO. Countries beg on their feet. They would lick the balls of NATO if NATO had balls, okay, to join NATO. All right? They would throttle NATO's dick if it means joining NATO, because that's how hard joining NATO is. Okay, that's how difficult it is, but nobody seems to understand that. Everybody just thinks, oh, NATO wants as many members as they want. That's not true. The more members NATO takes on, the more members NATO has to be responsible for once Russia invades one of the countries, right? Because Article 5 says if you make an attack against a NATO country, you make an attack against all of NATO. NATO is obligated to defend any NATO country that Russia attacks. So this is why NATO is hesitant about taking on new members, because if you join the organization, if you join the alliance, now the rest of the free world is responsible for your safety, and it would escalate into nuclear war where Russia would be the clear loser. They would not win. They will lose. So okay, don't let people get away with this talking point, please. Oh God, just please. If there's any talking point, just don't let them get away with this one, okay? Fuck.
No, NATO has largely expanded through voluntary joining. This has happened. Can you give me a country that you think that has joined NATO under coercion?
Right now in Romania, they've removed the populist right-wing candidate from being able to run for no reason. In France, Marine Le Pen has been accused of...
What does that have to do with joining NATO?
How is
Romania
it...
Romania
how can I determine whether or not the population of the country is willfully joining a nation when they remove its leaders?
Okay,
so if Russia
France join NATO,
they remove Ukraine's leader.
If USAID funds protests in
Ukraine isn't joining NATO.
Oh my, dude, did he say USAID? Oh, fuck off, dude. Fuck off.
No, hold on. The few days before the invasion, a demand was said, you promise never join NATO. Why didn't they just say, yeah, sure, we'll never join NATO. NATO will never accept them.
Because a country has a right to make its own choices.
You said they're not joining NATO. So if they're not joining it, why not they just say, yeah, we're never going to join?
Because you don't let a foreign power come in and tell you what you can and cannot do. You say, if we're going to exist as a country, we have to be at least somewhat independent and be able to make our own decisions. They don't want to be a puppet of Russia.
Okay, so they were never going to join it.
But I still want an answer.
They were never going to join
it. I still want an answer from you, Tim. Which NATO country has joined through coercion?
So my point is, I cannot assess which country is joining of their free will when we know in these countries they forcefully remove opposition to NATO. When a president starts to rise up, say Marine Le Pen, and she says we want to leave.
Bro, oh my God. Okay, I bet I can't look into this, okay? But I bet all of this is either misinformation, disinformation, or conspiracy. Because, again, he's bringing up these examples. Oh God, fuck. Okay, I can't disprove this technically, okay? But it's still absolutely true on its surface that people have to beg to join NATO, okay? Just FYI. Dave Smith got gaped by Sitch. Dave Smith got gaped by Douglas Murray, another fucking neoconservative, not even the lefty, okay? No, Loki. They're not emotionally low IQ, Loki. They're not emotionally low IQ. They are dishonest, okay? They're dishonest. All right, they're lying on purpose. This is what they do for their job. All right, they know they're spreading misinformation. Yeah, but whatever. Okay. I can't stay around forever. Okay, I can't.